Over the last 3 decades, before Covid-19 existed, international trade has experienced very rapid growth and development. Various factors such as technology, the internet, and free markets support this growth. The most significant factor in the process of globalization is foreign trade.
Now take a closer look on how this pandemic has plunged the international trade. Economic conditions continued to deteriorate in the second half of 2018 and more in 2019, after a rebound in the foreign trade in 2017 and the first half of 2018. In comparison with 2019, 2018's trade expansion has been widespread to cover most segments of goods and services in imports and exports. Growth in trade in goods and services declined in the first quarter of 2020 as the early effects of the pandemic began to be felt. An UNCTAD nowcast for trade in both goods and services detected a much more dramatic decline in second quarter compared with the first quarter. Medical products related to COVID-19, such as personal protective equipment, ventilators, thermometers, sanitizers, and the like, experienced a very high growth in the second quarter of 2020. For example, in May 2020, such product experiences an increase of 186% higher than the same period in 2019. Other non-medical products related to COVID-19, such as home office equipment including Wi-Fi routers, laptops, portable storage, and so on, also enjoyed strong growth in the second quarter. The impact of COVID-19 has not been uniform across different shipping market segments. Some segments have been hit very hard, but the decline in port calls is masked in the total figures by container traffic, which has not been hit as hard as some other segments.
After looking at how the pandemic has impacted the trade globally, let us move on how it has affected some particular countries. The rapid spread of COVID-19 and the measures taken by government to heal the situation had serious consequences for the world's major economies. Many productive activities have been disrupted, first in Asia and then in Europe, North America, and the rest of the world, and there have been widespread border closures. The volume of global trade in goods fell by 17.7% in May 2020 compared with the same month in 2019. The drop in the first 5 months of the year was widespread, although it particularly affected exports from the United States, Japan, and the European Union. One explanation why the COVID-19 has affected international trade is that international supply shock is relatively persistent over time, while the demand shock is not. Think of a country that's really badly infected at first. Consumers stop spending money, so there is no demand for imports.
Unexpectedly, the pandemic has not been a disaster to every country. Let's take Germany for instance. This country has shown an amazing strategy to cope with the pandemic. The German economy was able to face the repercussions of the corona crisis with great flexibility and avoid the recession that many European countries experienced during the last period. Germany has so far managed to overcome the crisis with the slightest damage. The current crisis showed the size of disparity in economic growth among the major European countries, as Germany clearly surpassed others in terms of health and economics, and it shows that the stability of consumption rate in Germany helped in the recovery of the economy significantly. What are the reasons behind its strong economy? First, the German economy was more consolidated before the crisis. Second, it has virtual closed policy. And lastly, it relies on local industry. Now let's talk deeper on the international trade. German exports grew for the fourth straight month in August, but the base is slowing as Europe's largest economy settles into a new economic normality after the coronavirus lockdown of the spring. Exports grew 2.4% in August after a 4.7% jump in July. On the other hand, imports grew 5.8% in August. Germany ships goods abroad worth 91.2 billion euros and imports goods worth 78.5 billion euros. Experts say the momentum of Germany's recovery appears to be slowing as countries around the world grapple with resurgence in COVID-19 cases, while Germany exports to China fell by only 1.1% compared with August 2019.
Because of this COVID-19, the Malaysia has reached an impasse and the government is trying his heart and soul to recover from this pandemic. Talking about the impact of COVID-19 on international trade, let us take a closer look on Malaysia, a country located in Southeast of Asia, very famous for the arrivals of tourists on land. Malaysia economy is projected to contract by 3.1% in 2020 due to sharp slowdown in economy activity caused by COVID-19 and the measures containing its spread. According to the Surviving the Storm, the latest edition of World Bank's Malaysia Economic Monitor released at June 2020, the World Bank expects growth to resume in 2021 at 6.1% as the outbreak eases. Aggregate investment contracted for the 11th consecutive quarter by 4.6% in Q1 2020, with a broad-based weakness in both private and public investment. Due to the weak external demand, Malaysia exports of goods and services declined for third consecutive quarter by 7.1% in Q1 2020, the largest decline since the global financial crisis in 2009. The private consumption moderated to 6.7% in Q1 2020, down to 8.1% in Q4, largely in 2009. Therefore, relocating expenditure towards priority areas, identifying new resources of non-tax revenue.
Unexpectedly, by entering June, Malaysia's trade seemed to show some progress. Malaysia's export performance in June indicated a recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, turning in an 8.8% increase in value to 82.9 billion ringgit Malaysia, from a 25.5% decline in May 2020. Malaysia's total trade for June stood at 145.8 billion ringgit, expanding by 2.2% compared with the same month last year. The Statistics Department highlighted that the export expansion was attributed to higher exports to China, 4.7 billion ringgit, and the United States, 2.1 billion ringgit, Hong Kong, 1.4 billion ringgit. However, exports to India declined by 1.4 billion ringgit. The main contributors to the export expansion were electrical and electronic products, 4.5 billion ringgit, rubber products, 1.8 billion ringgit, palm oil and palm oil-based agricultural products, 1.5 billion ringgit, and optical and scientific equipment in 993.8 million ringgit, also machinery equipment and parts. The International Trade and Industry Ministry attributed the improved performance overall to the gradual lifting of restrictions imposed because of COVID-19 in Malaysia and globally. However, it cautioned that the pace and strength of recovery in second half of 2020 will depend on sustainability of production and demand, as there are lingering risks amid signs of new wave of COVID-19 infection across the region. Whatever the future might bring, we hope this pandemic might come to the end at the very soon moment, and the world comes back to the beautiful place it was, and even better.